This is Brent Richardson, and welcome to the Business Minutia Podcast, where our focus is on the details of business that are often passed over by traditional classes and leadership training. We focus on the stories of real people who have tried, failed, and learned through their experiences and are willing to share their lessons with others. Welcome to episode 32. Our final of the 2020 season. We will be taking a holiday break and enjoying time with family, and I encourage you to do the same and take it with all the craziness that 2020 has brought us. Every opportunity you can take to take care of your mental health. I encourage you to do that.
Right, just hit the pause button on life a little bit,
Yes.
right?
You know, and typically we get into this battle in our home over when to put Christmas decorations out, and you know, after Thanksgiving, I think is fair game, and then you and I always battle over how. This year, there's no battle.
There isn't.
Nothing matters. just do whatever you want, right? If there's some shred of happiness that you can find, right, amongst the craziness between the pandemic and election nonsense and everything else, just chase that happiness a little bit. That's okay.
My holiday village and Christmas movies and Christmas music. That's my joy.
I'm with you on most of it, but the Christmas music. I am already done with Mariah Carey. I can't handle it anymore, and we've just started. But the Christmas Village, for any listeners out there, Jamie has a Christmas Village that rivals some villages. I mean, it's impressive. Most of the kitchen, we have this giant kitchen counter and bar, and it all gets overtaken, as well as a layer below it. I mean, it's, what are we saying, maybe 50 pieces or more?
Don't judge.
Don't
judge.
It's fantastic. I
Don't
love
judge.
it. It's hard to come in the house. You can be in a bad mood, come in the house and be like, oh, yeah, that's nice.
It's
That's
Christmas
positive.
time.
What are we going to talk about for our final episode of the year?
Presentation skills.
Presentation 101. So this is one that I certainly have a passion for, and so there's lots of stuff to talk about. And so, you know, in this series on communication that we've been doing, we've been talking about meetings, we've been talking about emails, and now let's talk about presentations and how to make these effective and work towards your advantage. And again, it is similar to what you've heard me say in the previous episodes. You are competing for engagement.
Okay, start us off with a story. Give us a good horror story of a presentation gone bad.
I can't remember if I've shared this on the podcast in the past, but this was the one that first comes to my mind. I had this is now a rule for myself that I don't do this, but I had someone who asked me to present a particular topic to very senior brass, right? And I didn't believe in it. I thought it was a bad idea, but I was also very very flattered that I was asked to present.
Right.
Didn't realize I was being used, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. I could get this opportunity to present, even though I didn't buy into it. And my arguments, stated my arguments. Well, I think this is actually the better strategy. So why would we present this? And, you know, I got counter-argued. No, this is important. Okay, all right, well, I'll present it. I get into the room presenting amongst all of these senior-level people that outrank me by far, and I could go look on Yahoo Finance and see how much money they make.
Yeah.
And the senior person in the room was on their phone, not really paying attention, and then halfway into my pitch just made counter arguments exactly to the arguments that I originally brought up.
And it's kind of a lose-lose, because if you're presenting information and then they fall in love with it, but you don't agree with it, then you've lost.
Right.
And
but I wasn't super passionate that way, so I was okay with that.
Yeah.
But the worst possible thing that could happen is what happened, is it bombed. And the senior leader in the room said, I don't know why we do this. And I can't say, I agree.
Your name's attached to it.
What am I going to turn around at the slides and be like, I agree, this is a terrible idea. So I'm stuck. And so in fact, I looked at the person in the room who had asked me to present this to begin with, like, would you like to step in here?
Right.
And they said nothing.
Right.
They just sat there like they didn't have any idea. I don't know who asked you to present this. And I learned a valuable lesson that day. Don't trust that person. But in addition, I won't present content that I don't believe in. If I don't believe in it, somebody else's content, I'm not going to present. I'm not going to pitch it.
So what are the little things that you do now to make sure you're successful?
Yeah, it starts with the preparation, right? And for me, it's all about establishing what my goal of the presentation is. There's all kinds of presentations. There's the kind where here's the status of what's now. To be clear, I'm not talking about a 5-minute pitch where you're just giving a general update on something.
Right.
That's not the kind of presentations we're talking about. I'm talking about a case where you've got, room full of people, 30 minutes, and you're trying to present an idea. You might be presenting a status, but it's a status of a project, but it's a big update, right? It's a significant project. It's going to take a half hour to give an update. So I'm talking about a really sizable presentation.
And most likely using a PowerPoint or something similar.
Yeah, it's not exclusively limited to PowerPoint, but that's what we'll kind of talk about. It's the most common thing that people use today. So you really want to know who your audience is. But if you don't know who your audience is, it makes this so difficult. It's just, you're just hoping that things work out. You really need to know who your audience is, what their background is, what kind of, experience they have, what level are they in the company, what their thought process is. You want to have as much of that as you're planning how you're going to present. Now, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to what action do you want your audience to take? Are you looking for them to back your idea? Are you looking for investment? Are you asking for money? Are you just looking for people to move out of the way? You just want advocacy, right?
It's the same kind of knowledge that you needed in writing the email 101 that we did last week.
It is very similar, very similar. You want to understand what the background is. And the same as when you're going into meetings. We talked a little bit about aligning with people before meeting. I'll tell you, if you're presenting, you certainly want to have an idea who's in the room, and we'll talk about that alignment as well in a second. But you definitely want that. You definitely don't want to be surprised.
Right. You don't want that hand raised to ask a question. You have absolutely no idea what they're fixing to ask.
You want to know what the agendas are of the people in the room. Yeah. What's their motivation? What are the things that they're thinking? What are the things that they care about? If you're trying to get them to buy into a strategy, or you're trying to get them to advocate for you, you need to be aware of what they're motivated by and what they're thinking. And if you don't know, find out. Talk around and ask people.
Right. And also their experience, right? Because if as an engineer you are talking to someone who is HR, they may not know the same jargon that you know.
Yes, absolutely. You need to understand what the disciplines are in the room.
Right.
And that determines how technical you really want to get. And I see so many people, they come in, right off the bat, guns blazing, and let's go straight into that. You need to be really clear about what the problem statement is at the beginning. We've said this in emails and in meetings as well. Be clear about what problem you're trying to solve. What is the problem statement? I want to understand that right away, what you're trying to accomplish. And I see tons of people that don't do this. They go straight to some data, or they go, and I don't know what we're doing here. And I wind up having to ask.
Right.
Don't do that.
But you can do that in a creative way. It can be through a story or anything like that to relate to them. Right.
Yeah, and what I love about a presentation as opposed to emails or other kinds of communication is it gives me a little more leeway in terms of time to be creative in that way and to increase my chances of engagement.
Right. And if you're using a story, if you can open with it and close with it and kind of all wrap it up, just like we used to with essays in high school, right? Same type of principle.
And I think, you don't. I don't want to suggest that you have to be like a tap dancing monkey in front of the room entertaining people. Although the more entertaining you can be, it does help with that engagement. But it doesn't have to be that way. And everybody's got a different personality, and everybody's going to present in a different way. So I can't tell you necessarily how to go do it the way I would do it, because it won't be meaningful for you. I've tried this in the past. Somebody would come and ask me like, "Hey, you do these presentations really well. I want to learn from you." And I say, "Oh, it's going to be great. What you're going to do is you're going to get there early, and as people start to come in the room, you're going to get to know them and greet them, and you're going to ask some questions, and you're going to have some early conversation about whatever's going on at the time, and then you're going to infuse that in your introduction, and you're going to bring the whole room together." Great advice for me. Terrible advice for the person I was talking to. You could see the terror in their eyes. Like, wait, you want me to talk to people I don't know? What they wanted to do is read slides.
Right.
So everybody's going to be a little bit different in this way. But ultimately, what you're trying to, you want to make sure you know who the audience is. You want to keep it as simple as you possibly can so that everybody can understand. Don't assume that people in the room will know your crazy acronyms. Don't assume they understand the problem statement. You need to state that and be clear.
So no dollar words.
No dollar words. I'm bad about it. I will use them from time to time, but in general, you'd be better off not having. But let me come back. You want to start with a clear objective and what the goal of the meeting is, and let people know that up front, and let them know here's the objective. I have had meetings where I went through and presented, and at the end of the meeting, a senior person in the room that really admired, pulled me aside and said, "So what was the point of the meeting? I don't know that was clear, and that's not like you to do that." And I was like, "I know." And in this particular case, I had to do it, but that's an example. You want to be clear about what the takeaway was. We're not all just getting together to have a donut, right? You're wasting people's time. There should be a goal or an objective that you're trying to accomplish.
Now, we've discussed before the rule of 3. Let's revisit that. What is the rule of 3 when it comes to presentations?
In general, they talk about this when they talk about like air traffic controllers. You don't want an air traffic controller, doing calculus while they're trying to land planes while also talking to their kid on the phone. You want the air traffic controller to do nothing but that. So it's a focus kind of thing is the idea. And you want people in the room, you want to guide them to the similar kind. You want them thinking about a narrow group of things. You try to hit them with 50 things, they're not going to be able to do this. Nobody's landing that plane. You need to narrow it down and zoom it into things that they can process and digest. And people will be able to process things in groups of 3.
Okay. Now, are those usually like timing based, where we've been, where we are, where we're going, or are they?
That's the one that I use a lot, but there's all kinds of ways you can do it, right? You can group them in all kinds of different ways. And in general, like you want to keep things simple so that you're, one key point per slide, or like if you're using old school transparencies, that's fine, whatever you're doing. I don't think the medium is the key thing, but for that, one thing that you've got in front of people at a time, you really want to have one key point. What's the one key point that you want people to take away? And that, by the way, should be the title of the slide.
Okay.
Right? I don't know how many times I've seen people have one key point and then the slide's titled something that makes no sense.
Right.
In general, people's brains are going to go to the title, and then they're going to work left to right, top to bottom. Right.
So in the presentation, do you say, these are the 3 things I'm going to teach you, I'm going to talk to you about, and then talk about the 3 things, and then loop back and say, I just taught you these 3 things?
Yeah, I'll do that at the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah.
So we're going to focus on 3 key areas today. That's a good practice. Sometimes it's so simple I don't need to do that.
Right.
And, so this is where it gets tough, is if you've got a ton of content, you need to group it into 3s.
Yeah.
And try to gather them in a story form that way. I'm telling you, it works very valuable. People will have a better chance of remembering that than here are the 15 items. I have no chance of remembering it. Right. Help them, help them narrow it down in a way that their brain can digest it and that they'll take those things away. Right. So about 1 key thing per slide, and about 3 in general, 3 key things that you want them to take away from the overall presentation. No more than 3. It can be 1, but there needs to be no more than 3. That's my recommendation. Now, could you pull it off with 5? Yeah, but why would you do that? Like, narrow it down.
Right. And if you don't know what the focus is, then you probably don't have enough information to be making the presentation yet, right?
Yeah.
You need to be able to narrow it down like that.
Yes.
Yeah, makes sense.
Don't assume your audience knows the details of what you're talking about. Have we talked about that already? I think that keeping it simple and this is where I think practice is really valuable. And this is where I recommend to people to leverage family members, dogs, pets, kids, anybody you can to practice present. You can say to the mirror, and that might be good for some people, but I have found I practice with you a lot. If it's important, if it's an important pitch, or sometimes even if it's not. And what's interesting about me, and this is probably just unique for me, it's the act of me presenting it to you. How many times do I catch myself and go, that won't work?
Right.
It's not even about you giving me feedback. It's me walking through it with you, and I realize, that's something about speaking the words.
Right, and sometimes
and
I'm looking at the slide. Right, and sometimes I look at the slide and I'm like, is everyone in the room going to know what that word is? Because I don't have any idea what that means. Yeah,
and I've made that recommendation. Present it to somebody non-technical. I told somebody, present it to your wife, and he said, my wife is an electrical engineer and she understands. Well, don't do that. Find somebody else. Call your mom. Right, find somebody that you can present this to that's non-technical. Okay, why? Well, because if you have technical content, it doesn't have to be super technical. If somebody doesn't understand it, because I guarantee you're going to have people in the room that you think know all this stuff, but they don't.
Right.
And your job is your goal is to get everybody engaged, right? Otherwise, why are you having the meeting?
Well, and the problem is that if you're going through a concept and you lose someone on the first slide and they already feel stupid, then they are going to zone out. And it may be really, really important what you're presenting.
And you've lost the engagement.
And as soon as you lose them, I mean, a lot of people aren't going to say, wait, can you help me understand this?
Yes. Yes. And I've seen people who are, that have presented that way, and I've pulled them aside after and be like, if you kept them engaged here and less acronyms, and they're like, yeah, I just wanted to get through it. Okay, if you just want to get through it, don't do that. Just stop presenting, right? But if you want to get better at this, right, you need to try to keep that engagement. You want to keep people all at the same page and bring everybody along the journey. You're taking them on a journey through your half-hour presentation or your hour-long presentation. You want to take everybody on that journey, and the more people you can have engaged there, the better.
Now, the other extreme of this would be if you dumb down everything to the point where, okay, so this is a chip and this is a computer. You don't need to go that far. You need to have a real baseline of what knowledge is in that room.
I like to start broad, right? So I keep everybody with me, and then I funnel in, and you can kind of zoom into to the details, right?
Yeah.
And I'll hear some people say, yeah, but I can't cover all the details if I do that. You probably don't need to cover all the details.
Right.
You probably want to cover just enough detail in one area so that people feel confident that you know what you're talking about. It depends on the kind of presentation, right? It's hard to give people such generic advice about presenting, but more than likely you just want to drill in so that they can see just far enough where they go, okay, I understand that there's enough credibility. This person seems to know what they're talking about. And then you can focus on, the actual pitch or what you're asking them of them, right?
Right.
Use stories and analogies, right? If you can. People will forget lectures, but they will remember stories. And we talk about that a lot on the podcast. So try to find a story you can tie in. It doesn't have to be, and I'll hear people say, well, I'm not really a storyteller. It's not really my thing. Everybody's a storyteller. It doesn't have to be a long story. It can be something brief, right? And it makes you approachable, and it has people, it's engaging, and people let their walls down a little bit, and it helps you.
And on a previous storytelling podcast, Storytelling for Presentations, right, I remember Sean talking about keeping like a notebook of when things were happening, writing down things that might be able to use in presentations later.
Right.
Stories that you can reflect on and bring back.
Jot down your or jot down your stories that you have that relate to things.
So then when it's time to get into a presentation, you can flip back through that book and go, oh, that would totally fit here.
Practice them with your friends, right? Practice those with your friends and get better at telling those stories, and then you can get them concise to where you can do them in 20 seconds and then tie them into your presentations.
Now, how important do you think the timing is as far as what time of day that you're doing the presentation? You may not have any say on this, right? But I mean, I've been in rooms where they have just served this huge pasta lunch or whatever. Everyone is half asleep.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that?
You need to adjust your energy level, in my opinion, based on the time of day. So if I'm presenting after lunch, I know I'm going to have to be higher energy.
Okay.
And I may even force engagement from people. I may go around and call people out of the audience to keep everybody on high alert that, all right, you keep calling me, I better pay attention.
Yeah.
So I might have to do that. I prefer to not, but if I've got to match my energy level to what's happening in the room. I actually had a supervisor as a vice president one time, as I was about to go up and give a presentation, a room full of people, big room full of people that I knew them, they don't know me. And I was going up behind somebody that was pretty dry and pretty stale, pretty boring. And it was after lunch. And the VP grabbed me and said, you got to wake this place up. You need to pick a fight. You need to be controversial. And I'm like, what? I can't do that right now. These people don't know me. And so I did. I was like, all right, how can I do this? And so I did. I opened up with the most controversial thing associated with my presentation. Now, it was really... I had to provoke a little bit for shock value, which I'm known to do anyway, but I just went with that approach. And sure enough, 2 vice presidents in the room stood up and were walking in the back of the room, and my VP was like, you got him.
I remember the story about the professor in college that had a racquetball on his desk. And no one had any idea why that racquetball was on his desk. And he would sit there and play with the racquetball and everything. And then one day, somebody fell asleep. And he picked up that racquetball and pegged him in the head. Boom! Kid wakes up. The next day, professor comes in with a bowling ball and puts it there. No one is going to sleep.
I've heard the version with like a ping pong ball, and then it's a tennis ball, and then it's a basketball, and then it's a bowling ball. But that's a different kind of trick to promote engagement. I don't recommend it. But you do want to match your energy level to the room.
Yeah.
If somebody was right before me presenting and they were super high energy and doing cartwheels, I'm not gonna come with that approach, right? I may dial it down a touch.
Well, and it's really hard to follow someone who has been high energy energy.
No
it's
kidding.
It's also hard to follow someone who has just put their whole room to sleep.
Yeah, and there's certain people that I've had to present behind, and I knew when I had to present after them, I got no chance.
Yeah.
Right? I was no chance. I can't compete
Who
with
wants
them.
to follow that?
Exactly.
Let's talk about some etiquette.
Well, hold on timing.
Oh,
so
yes.
One other thing on timing.
Okay.
You're talking about what time of day.
Yeah.
But if you're going to talk about presentation 101, you can't ignore, don't go over your allotted time. Yeah. If you've been given 20 minutes but I'm bad about this because if you're engaging and you get questions, good luck getting all your content. That's the challenge, right? So you need to decide based on the criticality of the information you're presenting. The trade-off between getting engagement from people, because if you want questions being asked, right? I want people asking questions because the engagement increases. But if that costs me not being able to cover all my material, that's where it gets tricky in terms of covering a lot. But don't go over your time unless you've been specifically. Now, I've had cases where people ask me a bunch of questions, say, hey, I want to be sensitive to the 20 minutes that I've been given. I want to answer that question. Are you okay with me covering this? I actually did this to a senior person, and my boss was in the room going, oh, I can't believe you just told him that. Because this guy was about to be the CEO. I can't believe you just told him that. But I knew that I can't cover the content, and I want to answer the question, but there's no way. I want to be sensitive. I want to be sensitive to the time that I've been allotted. So don't go over your time unless you've been specifically. Now, so how do you avoid that? Practice.
Yeah.
Practice. This is where you go back to practicing with your family, practice with a dog, practice in the mirror.
And the more you do the presentations, the more you know if you're the kind of person that speeds up when you're presenting live in front of people, or if you're the kind of person that slows down, or you've got to learn that about yourself.
Yes, and I think everybody's a little bit different there.
Yeah.
Everybody's content, your content could be different. You may have one slide that you might spend 2 minutes on, and you're just going to gloss over it, and then you might have one that you know is going to be a 15-minute slide. There's no way I'm getting off of this in 15 minutes because it's got, maybe that one key point you're trying to hit and it's very controversial, for example, then you're not going to be able to get off the stage.
Right. Now are you ready to talk about etiquette?
Let's talk about etiquette.
Okay. These are usually fun.
Yes. And the first one that I thought of is we've talked about before on the podcast, which is watch the laser pointer. We were talking about this when it came to giving feedback. I see people that are just dancing with the laser pointer, or if in the virtual world today, it's just the mouse moving around. And they're looking over here and looking. All I see is your mouse moving, and I'm having a hard time processing, right? So watch the laser pointer all over the room. I've seen people hit with the laser pointer just on nonstop, and they're pointing it at people, and everybody's like, whoa, easy, Tiger. I don't know what that thing does to me, but I don't want cancer. Watch how you're dancing around with the laser pointer. Don't read slides. One of my favorite moments in a presentation was one of my team members giving a presentation to a vice president, and the vice president stopped him and said, hey, do you think I went to college? Do you think I know how to read? And the guy was like, yeah. He goes, then why are you reading to me?
Right.
Don't read slides. So how do you avoid that? Everybody's going to be different. For me, the content that I put on the slide is just enough to give me the idea of what I'm going to cover.
Right.
Right. It just gives me a little bit of the thread that I go, oh yeah, that's what that's about. And then I will continue and run with the rest of it. Some people are different. I know of a lady that I work with that writes out everything she's going to present.
Yeah.
She writes everything out and puts it in the notes and PowerPoint at the bottom of the little notes section.
Yep.
She puts it all word for word right there. That's not my style. What happens if I write all that stuff? I'll miss a word, or I'll mess up a little bit, and then I get inside my head. And it won't be conversational. It's easier for me to not have it scripted and for me to just have the basic outline and the skeleton.
Well, and we've noticed the same thing with interviews we've done on the podcast.
Yeah.
Some people want to write out everything they're going to say, and then they send that to us. And it's great information to have.
But it's boring to listen to.
Well, it's boring if they read off of
that's
it.
That's what I mean. It gets boring if they're just reading through that. So
don't
read slides. I've talked about a couple of these points already. One key critical point per slide is my recommendation. 3 key points for the whole presentation in general. Right. Summarize that at the end, right? You can talk about, here are the 3 things we're talking about at the end. Just recall, you want to make sure you leave with that conclusion, with what's the call to action. Why are you, state what your purpose is at the beginning, right? And then make sure you're calling that back at the end and saying, here's the conclusion of what I'm asking you to do. Pet peeve time, okay? PowerPoint has something where you're editing. You have an edit mode, okay? And then you have a presentation mode. Watching people present outside of presentation mode is a major pet peeve of mine. It's there on purpose. So if you've never seen PowerPoint, I'm shocked, but if you've never, or some version of this, right? I'm not advocating for Microsoft products, but there's different versions of this slide sort kind of software. But the purpose of the presentation mode is to put it in full screen so I can see everything and I don't have to squint, right? And you've got it shrunk down in some mode. Why? What's the purpose of that?
Right, and if you're outside of the presentation mode, the animation doesn't work. None of that kind of stuff works.
Which is a great point. Watch your animation content, right? I learned this in college where I had this gigantic presentation and I thought it was super cool to have fancy animation and I was going to show this future potential employer of mine that I know how to use PowerPoint. And I had so much animation, then I got there and realized that they had me presenting on some like 486 computer from 1985, and it was so slow. Every animation click was like, and I was just staring at people. And don't do that. So I started really dialing back and minimizing the animation. So be careful with that.
And what about giving credit?
Yeah, this is another. I was talking with a friend of mine this week about what their biggest pet peeves when it came to presentations, and this was theirs. Not giving credit for a slide that somebody else had taken. What this does for you is it just creates distrust.
Right.
Like I've seen people presenting my content, and I go, note to self, don't share any content with that person because they're not going to give you any credit for it.
Right.
And this can be either the slide or the data or the information that went into the slide. But if you will actually give credit to the person, everybody else in the room goes, hey, this person's a credible, trustworthy person. So it's a double win for you to credit the people that you got the slide content from. And then the last thing maybe I'll talk about, which is, and again, there's so many things we could talk about. But again, it's presentation 101. So we're just hitting some of the basic highlights. But the last thing that I would talk about is what I call eye charts. Everybody knows, but I also another one called energy slides, and I'll talk about what that means. Eye charts, don't put stuff in a presentation that people can't see, or that's going to take them. People that post like a giant Excel sheet with like 50 different cells that people are supposed to process. How much time are you really think they're going to go through all that? Right? Don't do that. Now, what you can do is you can zoom out and make it impossible for them to read, and then you can describe why you're putting it there. And maybe what you're saying is, hey, we have a process, we're tracking this, blah, blah, whatever, and then make it so they can't see it. Right? That, or cut it down and zoom into just the three things you want them to see, right? And show that. But don't create these giant eye charts that nobody can read and they're squinting to try to process, because you're just confusing people and making them frustrated. And then energy slides are different. What do I mean by energy slides? I'll see people who will put this slide together that draws no conclusion. I don't look at it and gain any kind of point other than the fact that there's a bunch of energy working here. We have a bunch of stuff going on. We're doing a bunch of stuff, which is very similar to the what I did this summer presentation or what I did this summer meeting, right? I don't care. Just send that in an email. This is not necessary for you to cover here. It's wasted space in the presentation.
That is good information. Let's stop there for the presentation 101. Again, this is our last episode of the year. We will come back beginning of next year. But what we do want to know from all of our listeners is, what do you guys want next year to look like? What things do you want covered that we haven't covered yet? We've
got some good stuff that we're going to be rolling out.
Oh, yeah.
When is the right time to quit your job?
Right.
That one's coming up. I think that one's pretty powerful. Vision. Mission statements, but really for your life and for your own, like how to set your priorities and your purpose of what you're trying to do within the role and the company that you're in. I think that one's really powerful. And I think we want to revisit this self-awareness thing again. We have a lot of feedback on the Enneagram, so we may see if we can recruit Mary Ann for another round. Let's see.
Love it.
Have a good holiday, folks. Enjoy some time off. Take care of yourself mentally, right? Enjoy the break. Stay healthy, stay safe. We will see you guys next year.